On a crisp September morning, a private spacecraft vanished from NASA's telemetry screens. The capsule, branded by Aurora Space Tourism, was carrying 6 civilians and Malcolm Reeves, the Texas billionaire who had funded the trip. Launch had been picture-perfect from Kennedy Space Center. 90 minutes later, as the capsule drifted over the Pacific at 80 miles altitude, a piece of space debris tore through its maneuvering thruster. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. The craft spun. Communications cut out. In Houston, controllers stared at blank monitors. Reeves's wife fainted. News networks broke into programming. Headlines screamed about the first space disaster of the commercial age. NASA dispatched an unmanned tug, but its docking system was incompatible. The Air Force readied a rescue mission it hadn't practiced in years. On a ranch outside Austin, a woman heard the news on an old radio. She set down her coffee, eyes narrowing. Years ago, she had crawled through burning compartments on the International Space Station. She had sworn never to return. But Reeves had saved her life in Mosul, and she owed him. When her phone buzzed with a secure number, she didn't hesitate. "Nyasha," a voice said. "We need you in orbit immediately." She answered the secure call with grease still on her fingers. Colonel Ray Martinez didn't waste time. "Aurora 7 has lost control, Nyasha. Malcolm Reeves is aboard. We need a pilot with EVA experience." She stared at the sun-bleached pasture stretching beyond her porch. "I'm out," she said. "I promised myself." Martinez's voice softened. "Reeves pulled you out of Mosul. He asked for you by name. We have a Soyuz that can dock. Batteries on Aurora will die in 48 hours. Without you, those people have no chance." She looked at the charred mission patch hanging in her barn. She remembered Reeves laughing as he dragged her through rubble. She whispered, "Fine. My conditions. You choose your crew." Martinez agreed. He listed them: Dr. Layla Hassan, trauma surgeon; Mike Chow, propulsion engineer; Martinez himself as Capcom. Launch in 30 hours. She drove overnight to Ellington Field. The hangar smelled of fuel. Technicians were refitting a Soyuz capsule, its heat shield scoured but still sound. Dr. Hassan, tall, with quick eyes, and Chow, stocky, grease on his hands, greeted her. They ran through a crash course: docking procedures, thruster firings, abort modes. Aurora 7 was tumbling at one rotation every 30 seconds. Its thrusters were dead. Solar panels were still charging, but the battery controllers showed faults. Messages from Reeves were frantic, stars spinning. "Oxygen okay." Tourists panicked. Nyasha suited up in a Sokol suit, braids tucked under a communications cap. The weight of the suit pressed against her shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. She stared at her reflection. 45, lined, hardened. "We'll bring them home," Hassan said quietly. Nyasha nodded once. In the control room, cameras flashed through glass. News anchors speculated about AI rescues and billionaire hubris. No one said her name. She liked that. She strapped into the left seat of the Soyuz, with Chow on her right and Hassan in the module above. Martinez's voice crackled over the loop. "Rescue crew, you are go for launch." Engines rumbled. The rocket shoved them skyward. Vibration shook their bones. At 8 minutes, the first stage dropped and weightlessness wrapped around them. The Earth curved beneath. Nyasha's hands moved across switches, checking thrusters, pressure, orbital parameters. The chase had begun. 2 hours later, the Soyuz closed in on the tumbling tourist capsule. Through the window, she saw Aurora spinning, its white hull scarred. Inside, faces pressed to portholes. Hassan unstrapped and floated up to prepare medical kits. Chow read out velocity. .05, closing. Nyasha fired a puff from a thruster. The Soyuz nose dipped, aligning with the target. "We get one chance," Martinez reminded. She pressed the handstick gently. The docking probe extended. "Contact." "Soft dock," Chow said. She locked the mechanism and equalized pressure. "Hard dock," she replied. They opened the hatch. Warm air rushed in. 6 frightened faces stared. Malcolm Reeves floated forward. "About time," he rasped, forcing a grin. She clasped his forearm. "Let's work," she said. Tourists clung to seats. Hassan checked vitals. Chow assessed systems. Nyasha tethered herself and floated to the damaged thruster. Wires hung loose, a panel was burned. "Micrometeoroid hit," she reported. She snapped in a replacement board. The thruster fired, stabilizing the spin. Cheers echoed. Reeves floated to the controls. "Sensors are fried," he said. "We can use Soyuz as a tug," she replied. They planned to transfer tourists, leaving Reeves and Nyasha to stabilize Aurora. She glanced at Reeves. "You ready?" He shook his head. "Not yet." Martinez announced, "Battery life extended. 16 hours. Nyasha flexed her hands. 16 hours to keep a promise. The real work had begun. The next hour became a ballet of bodies and equipment in a space not much larger than a minivan. Nyasha kept her voice steady as she guided the tourists through the narrow hatch into the Soyuz. "Hand over hand, one at a time. Keep your feet clear of the cables." The first two were a middle-aged couple from Ohio, faces pale and eyes wide. They clutched each other and floated like uncertain birds. Dr. Hassan strapped them into molded seats in the re-entry module, attached for drips, and gave them sips of water. The third tourist, a young influencer with blue hair and painted nails, hyperventilated. "I can't breathe," she gasped, though the air was fine. Hassan unzipped a med kit and pressed a small patch of lorazepam to her arm. "Just relax. You're safe now." The girl's breathing slowed. Reeves stayed behind with Nyasha and Chow in the Aurora. His jaw was clenched, sweat beads forming on his forehead. "I can't leave them," he said quietly. "This is my ship." Nyasha bit back a retort. She respected stubbornness. She also knew when to let it be. "Then help me keep her alive," she said. "Chow, what's the power status?" Chow floated at a laptop. Tapping keys. Panels at 70%, batteries recharging. "But there's a gyroscope fault. The attitude sensors aren't giving clean data." Reeves frowned. "I wrote that software," he muttered. "It shouldn't fail." Nyasha thought of micrometeoroids punching holes where they shouldn't. "Maybe something else hit," she said. "Or maybe someone skimped on shielding." Reeves's eyes flashed. But he said nothing. Martinez's voice came over the loop. "Rescue crew. Tracking shows a debris cloud from an old Chinese rocket moving toward your position. Relative velocity, 7 kilometers per second. Spread is wide, but there's a 10% chance of impact in the next 20 minutes. Nyasha looked at Chow. He grimaced. "We can't undock and redock in that time. We could fire the port thrusters and change altitude by a few hundred meters," Reeves said. "But we'll lose alignment." Nyasha's mind ran through options. "We don't have to leave," she said. "We can go outside." She clipped on her EVA tether and opened a locker with an Orlan suit, bulkier than the Sokol but built for spacewalks. Hassan stopped buckling in a tourist long enough to catch her eye. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," Nyasha replied. "But that debris will shred the solar arrays if I don't move them." She wriggled into the Orlan, pressurized it, and cycled through the small airlock. As the outer hatch opened, she felt the familiar tug of the tether and the infinite black around her. Earth gleamed below, blue and white. She pulled herself along handrails to the base of the solar panel. Her breath sounded loud inside the helmet. She saw the debris cloud as sparkling motes of light streaking in the distance. With gloved fingers, she pulled a release lever and rotated the array 90 degrees, presenting a narrower profile. A shard zipped past, missing her by meters. She cursed softly. She reached for the second panel, hands shaking slightly. 3 minutes to cloud, Martinez warned. She turned the second array. Then a third. A small piece pinged off her left arm, thunking against the suit. "Suit holding," she said, her heart pounding. The debris passed like a swarm of fireflies, some closer than she liked. None catastrophic. She exhaled and pulled herself back toward the hatch. Inside, Reeves took the hand controller. "Euro 1 offline, Euro 2 marginal," he reported. Nyasha stripped off her helmet, sweat clinging to her hairline. "We'll have to fly her manually with star trackers," she said. Chow nodded, face pale. Hassan floated in, her face calm. "All tourists secured. They're scared, but stable." Nyasha looked at her. "Get ready to undock," she said, "in case this goes sideways." Hassan's eyes widened, but she nodded. Martinez came back on the loop. "Good news," he said. "Battery life now at 90%. Debris cloud passed. Bad news. Solar panel 3 shows a slow leak. Could be cracked cells." Nyasha sighed. "We're running out of hands." Reeves grinned suddenly. The tension breaking. "This is what we get for outsourcing panel manufacturing," he joked. She snorted. "Not the time." They worked through the procedures, bypassing sensors, referencing star charts. Time blurred. 6 hours passed. Aurora held orientation. Soyuz remained docked, a lifeboat ready to go. The tourists slept fitfully strapped in, dreaming perhaps of Florida beaches. At hour 14, Martinez radioed. Trajectory for combined re-entry is plotted. Weather in Kazakhstan is clear. Decision time. Transfer Reeves to Soyuz and abandon Aurora, or attempt dual descent. Reeves shook his head. If I leave, the next billionaire won't get on a capsule. We finish this. Nyasha met his gaze. All right, she said. She glanced at Hassan and Chow. They nodded. She keyed the mic. Capcom, we're staying with Aurora. Ready for burn. Martinez took a long breath. Copy. You're the pilot. Nyasha settled her hands on the controls. Earth rotated beneath them, vast and unfeeling. She whispered a prayer to whoever was listening and waited for the burn cue. Nyasha's gloved fingers hovered over the Soyuz control panel, waiting for the countdown that would fire Aurora's engines and commit both ships to a fiery fall through the atmosphere. Reeves strapped himself into the pilot's couch beside her, his jaw set. Dr. Hassan floated into the descent module, checked the tourist's harnesses, and squeezed Chow's shoulder. Chow's knuckles were white on the engineer's panel. Capcom, Nyasha said, confirm burn time. Martinez's voice came with static. Burn starts at T-minus 30 seconds. 2 minutes 6 seconds duration. Delta V 75 meters per second. This will lower perigee into the atmosphere. Copy, she replied. She glanced at Reeves. No turning back. He nodded. Let's burn. The countdown reached 0. Nyasha pressed the engine start button. Aurora's main engine ignited with a deep rumble transmitted through the hull. She and Reeves felt a push forward as the craft decelerated. Burn nominal, Chow said, watching numbers scroll. Stars outside shifted slowly. After 60 seconds, a light flashed amber. Heater B failed, Chow called. Fuel line temperature dropping. Fuel freezing would cut off thrust. Reeves toggled the backup. Nothing happened. Nyasha's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Switch to Soyuz engine now, she barked. She jammed her hand on the Soyuz control stick. The old capsule's motors roared to life, adding thrust. The combined thrust vector skewed, pitching them. The horizon tilted. Course deviating, Chow warned. Nyasha compensated, firing left thrusters. Sweat trickled down her back. Come on, she muttered. Hold together. The burn ended. An alarm blared. Separation pyros armed, Martinez said. Time to decide. Reeves stared at Aurora's dark screens. We can ride her down, he insisted. Nyasha shook her head. Her attitude system is toast. If she goes sideways, we'll incinerate. Get in the Soyuz. Reeves hesitated. Tourists whimpered in the module below. Hassan's voice floated up. He's got to make the call. Nyasha turned to Reeves. You owe me, she said softly, echoing his words in Mosul. Stay alive to collect. His eyes met hers. He unbuckled, pushed himself through the tunnel into the Soyuz descent module, and strapped into the empty couch between Chow and Hassan. Nyasha sealed the hatch, floated back to the Soyuz controls, and armed the separation bolts. Capcom, Aurora crew transferred, she said. Martinez exhaled audibly. Copy. Fire separations. Nyasha flipped the red guard and pressed the button. Explosive bolts fired with a muffled thud. The Soyuz lurched as springs pushed it away from Aurora. Through the small periscope, she watched the tourist capsule drift off, tumbling slowly, glowing faintly as the first wisps of atmosphere kissed its heat shield. Reeves's jaw clenched. Good luck. Orange fire licked the windows. G-forces built, pressing them into seats. Hassan counted out loud to keep passengers calm. 1,000, 2,000. The radio crackled with static. Too steep, and they would burn. Too shallow, and they would skip. She saw the needle drift. She fired a roll thruster. It responded sluggishly. Gyro still funky. Chow grunted between clenched teeth. Nyasha corrected again. The capsule groaned. Then the thrashing calmed. Plasma thinned. They fell into dark, then dawn. A loud bang sounded as drogue chutes deployed, jerking them upright. Chutes open, Hassan reported, voice hoarse. Seconds later, the main canopy blossomed, red and white against blue sky. The Soyuz swayed gently. Nyasha let her head fall back, muscles trembling. They were alive. Reeves laughed, a sound part hysterical, part relief. I can't believe we bailed on my own ship, he said. Your ship will make a nice meteor shower, Nyasha replied. We'll watch it from a bar. The capsule thudded onto the Kazakh steppe, tipping on its side and dragging a short distance. Dust rose. Everything went still. Recovery forces were on them within minutes. Russian soldiers in blue jumpsuits, NASA doctors in white parkas. Hatch bolts were blown. Fresh air rushed in. Hands reached down. Hassan climbed out first, then the tourists, tears streaming. Chow groaned as he squeezed through. Reeves emerged, blinking in the morning light. Where's our pilot? A rescuer asked. Nyasha unstrapped, pushed herself to the hatch, and paused. Cameras pointed up. She hesitated, then took the offered hand. She squinted at the sunlight, heart pounding. Reporters shouted questions. Reeves put an arm around her shoulder and whispered, "They'll never know." She smiled faintly. "Good." She turned to the doctor. "My crew's tired. Get them blankets." As medics led the others to warm tents, Nyasha ducked around the capsule and disappeared behind a recovery vehicle. An hour later, in the shadow of the landing craft, Reeves pulled out his satellite phone and dialed Caldwell. "It's done," he said. "She saved us." Caldwell replied, "Tell her the debt is paid." Reeves looked around. She was gone. He smiled and hung up. Somewhere over the horizon, a bright streak lit the morning sky as Aurora 7 broke apart harmlessly, a shooting star that had once carried dreams. News of the rescue broke like a supernova. By breakfast in New York, networks aired footage of the Soyuz capsule smoking gently on the Kazakh plain. Headlines read, "Billionaire saved in daring space rescue," and "Aurora disaster averted by unmanned tug." Cable hosts interviewed experts who praised the resilience of Aurora's AI, the bravery of Reeves and his crew, and the cooperation between Russia and the United States. A NASA press release credited a joint emergency protocol and our highly trained astronauts, without listing names. Reeves, in a silver blanket, waved to cameras and said, "Our systems worked as designed." Tourists posed for selfies with Kazakh soldiers, their terror already morphing into bragging rights. At a press conference in Houston, Caldwell stood at a podium emblazoned with the Aurora logo. Behind him, a backdrop of stars and the company's slogan, "Bringing space to everyone." Cameras flashed. "Today could have been a tragedy," he said, his voice measured. "Instead, it's proof that American innovation and international cooperation save lives." Aurora's design integrity allowed precious time. NASA's leadership and a brave crew brought everyone home. When asked if he would halt flights, he shook his head. "We will pause, investigate, improve. But humanity's future is in space. We won't be deterred." No one asked about the woman who flew the Soyuz. Caldwell glanced at a monitor offstage and saw a split screen, Malcolm Reeves hugging his wife, and Aurora stock price rebounding. Investigators swarmed Ellington Field. NTSB officials photographed the Soyuz. A team from the Russian Space Agency interviewed Chow about the engine shutdown. An FAA engineer took apart Aurora's thruster to examine the burned panel. Someone asked why a micrometeoroid shield was thinner than spec. Lawyers circled. Martinez sat with an Air Force colonel, explaining how a mission designed in the Cold War had saved a private craft built with venture capital. "It's going to get political," he muttered to Hassan. She shrugged. "We saved 8 people. They can politicize all they want." Chow slept on a folding cot in the hangar, exhausted. Reeves spent hours giving statements. He never once mentioned the words Nyasha or former special operative. That night, Reeves drove to a hotel by the airport. A woman in a janitor's uniform stood outside a side door, smoking. Her cap shadowed her face. "You're hard to find," he said softly. She flicked her cigarette into a bin. "I'm not hiding. I'm just not a brand." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin, a challenge coin with the emblem of the unit that had saved him in Mosul. "I kept this for you," he said, pressing it into her hand. "Debt paid." She looked at the coin, then at him. "Don't build anything else that tries to kill you," she said. He laughed. "No promises." She slipped the coin into her pocket. He wanted to ask her to dinner, to sign a book deal, to join his company. He said none of that. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded and walked away into the parking lot shadows. Caldwell watched a recording of Reeves and the woman from his home office. He paused on her profile as she turned. He whispered her name, a name no one else knew, and smiled. He pulled up another document, a preliminary accident report. It listed micrometeoroid impact as likely cause. He highlighted a line about the panel supplier. Find out if Price owns them, he told his assistant. His mind was already on the next move in a game the public didn't see. On a farm road outside Austin, a pickup truck rumbled past fields of sunflowers. At the wheel, Nyasha hummed to an old country song. In the passenger seat sat a toolbox and a rolled-up sleeping bag. She was heading west, maybe to Arizona, maybe to nowhere. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number read, "Payment transferred. Check your account. Stay ready." She tossed the phone onto the seat and smiled. In her rearview mirror, the sun dipped behind a hill, painting the sky orange and purple. She thought of stars and spinning in flames, and then of horses and quiet barns. She laughed quietly to herself. Heroism didn't buy peace, but it paid for gas. In his room, Caldwell's son Ethan played a space simulator. He crashed his digital capsule on purpose and imagined a woman with braids saving him. His sketchbook lay open to a drawing of her with a cape. He closed it before his father walked in. "Bedtime," Caldwell said. Ethan nodded. On the nightstand, his tablet flashed a headline. Aurora resumes flights next year. He tapped it away and whispered, "I know who really saved them." He smiled and turned off the light. By the time Reeves flew back to Texas and gave his exclusive interview on a late-night talk show, the official investigation had become a labyrinth. Engineers at NASA's Johnson Space Center disassembled the burned Aurora thruster in a clean room. Under microscopes, metallurgists found machining marks inconsistent with Aurora's specs. A forensic accountant traced the subcontractor's payment to a shell company in Cyprus. The company's owner had ties to an Italian venture fund called Amalfi Capital. "Amalfi again," Martinez said, tapping a file on his desk. That name came up in Dubai. Caldwell frowned. He had seen it in a report about an attempted kidnapping in Rome. He summoned his head of security, a former FBI agent named Dana Lovelace. "Find out who sits behind Amalfi," he ordered, "and keep Price on your radar." Lovelace dug through corporate registries, encrypted emails, and offshore banking logs. Patterns emerged. Amalfi Capital invested in companies that built critical components for space vehicles, telecom networks, and renewable energy projects. Sometimes those projects suffered accidents that benefited competitors. "It's a front for sabotage," she told Caldwell in his office, pushing a stack of printouts across his desk. One name surfaced repeatedly: Vincenzo Rossi, an Italian industrialist with rumored links to organized crime. "Rossi donates to art charities in Rome," Lovelace added. "He also sits on the board of Price's European subsidiary." Caldwell drummed his fingers. Reeves was just collateral, he mused. This is a power play. He stared at a photograph of Rossi at an art gala. Beside him stood a man Caldwell recognized from surveillance. The same one who had been in Dubai, the same one at Price's side. The game pieces aligned. In a glass office in Milan, Rossi answered a secure call. "Amalfi's cover is blown," the caller said in Italian. Rossi's lip curled. "I told you not to use American parts." He snapped. "Our problem is not the parts, it's the woman," the voice replied. "She interferes everywhere." Rossi leaned back. "The ghost? She saved the boy, she saved the oil rig. She saved the billionaire. She won't always be lucky." He hung up and swirled his espresso. He sent a message to Price. "We must move up the timeline. The minister will be difficult." Price responded. "Agreed. Rome in 3 weeks." Nyasha, meanwhile, was adjusting to life on the road again. She drove west through Arizona, stopping at a desert diner to drink weak coffee and watch dust devils twist on the horizon. Her phone buzzed with a number she now knew well. She answered without greeting. "Our hunch was right," Caldwell said. "Amalfi ties together Dubai and Aurora. They're planning something in Rome. Art fair, high-value targets. My man says Price is involved." Nyasha sipped her coffee. "You have government agencies for this." "They don't have you," he replied. "I can't order you. I can ask." She laughed softly. "You always ask at the worst times. It's when you're not expecting it." He said, "There will be a token payment." She rolled her eyes. "It's never about the money." He was silent for a heartbeat. "It's about keeping people alive. And paying debts," he said. "And maybe making the world a little safer." She stared out the diner window. She thought of the faces in Aurora, of Reeves's smirk, of the young influencer calming down as Hassan placed a patch on her arm. Send details, she said quietly. And don't tell Price I'm coming. 2 days later, a packet arrived at the P.O. box Nyasha used in Flagstaff, an unmarked envelope containing a flash drive, a folded itinerary for the Roma Artissima Art Fair, and a note. Vincenzo Rossi. Possible kidnapping. Targets. Italian Defense Minister, American CEO. Contact at Piazza Navona. She memorized the names and burned the note in a motel bathroom sink. She booked a flight to Rome using a passport under the name Elena Marini. She texted Reeves one word, safe. He replied with a string of rocket emojis and a beer mug. She smiled. At Amalfi Capital's headquarters, Rossi raised a glass at a board meeting. Our next venture will bring significant returns, he said. Price clinked his crystal tumbler against Rossi's. To partnerships, Price said, and eliminating obstacles. In Houston, Caldwell closed his blinds and looked out at the twinkling city. He felt a chill despite the warm evening. He tapped out another message to Lovelace. Book me on a plane to Rome. Under an alias. Nyasha packed her harness and her small, trusted multi-tool. She folded her orange crop top away and pulled out a conservative blouse. A new theater awaited. Caldwell hated traveling under false names. Not because he feared getting caught, but because it reminded him how easily a life could be erased. He boarded an Alitalia flight as Michael Smith, wearing jeans and a worn leather jacket. Lovelace sat 2 rows behind, eyes hidden behind reading glasses. Do you think she'll let you see her? Lovelace whispered when Caldwell passed by to stretch his legs. I don't plan to approach. He replied. I just want to make sure the Italians don't screw this up. Lovelace smirked. You're pretending it's about oversight, not attachment. Caldwell didn't answer. Nyasha landed at Fiumicino a day earlier. She navigated the customs line with ease, Italian passport clipped between manicured fingers. She had dyed her braids chestnut and cut them shorter. In Trastevere, she checked into a small apartment and slept little. At dawn, she walked along the Tiber and rehearsed cover stories in Italian. At mid-morning, she met her contact at Piazza Navona, the woman with the cigarette sliding the badge in a newspaper, as detailed in Caldwell's dossier. Nyasha didn't know the woman's name. Names were dangerous. Gate 3, 1800. The woman whispered, and the plan began to solidify. On the other side of Rome, Vincenzo Rossi lounged in a suite at the Hassler Hotel overlooking the Spanish Steps. He sipped espresso and read a Corriere della Sera article praising the art fair and its charitable goals. He chuckled. Art was a business like any other. Price arrived in a tailored suit, removing his sunglasses. Everything is set. Price asked. Of course, Rossi said. Our security badges will work. Our friend in maintenance has disabled a few cameras. The van is stocked and the route is clear. By the time anyone notices, we will be on a private airfield. And our ghost? Price asked. Rossi shrugged. If she shows, shoot her. If she dies, tell the world she attacked us. Price's jaw tightened. She keeps saving Caldwell's people. She's a problem. Rossi smiled. Every problem has a price. At the Palazzo Barberini, Italian security services fussed over metal detectors and bomb-sniffing dogs. Uniformed carabinieri checked badges of caterers and electricians. A man in a dark suit with a pin that identified him as from the Italian Ministry of Defense stood with his arms crossed, scanning for threats. His name was Colonel Luca Bianchi. He had spent 2 decades hunting mafia hitmen in Sicily. Now he had been told to coordinate security for an art event. He was not amused. A liaison from the U.S. Embassy tried to hand him a list of potential threats. We know our city, Bianchi said. This is a gala, not a summit. The liaison shrugged and pocketed the paper. Bianchi hadn't seen the dossier with Amalfi circled in red. Caldwell and Lovelace landed in Rome and went straight to a meeting with officials from the Polizia di Stato in a palazzo near the Quirinal Palace. He sat in a leather chair under a frescoed ceiling and listened to an Italian commissioner insist the art fair was secure. Caldwell sipped water and nodded. A week ago, someone tried to blow up my spacecraft, he said softly. 3 months ago, someone tried to kidnap a sheik in Dubai. The same shell company paid for both operations. Today that company's CEO sits in your city. I'm not here to tell you your business. I'm here to make sure you know the stakes. The commissioner's smile faded. We will increase patrols, he said. Lovelace passed him a file with Rossi's photo and the note about Amalfi. Caldwell knew the Italians might resent the interference, but he hoped they would at least put more eyes on the shadows. Nyasha spent the day before the gala walking the neighborhood around the Palazzo Barberini. She bought a gelato and sat on a bench outside, counting staff entrances. She memorized the location of fire extinguishers and emergency exits. She timed how long it took a guard to walk from one end of the salon to the other. She watched vendors unload cases of champagne, crates of truffles, sculptures wrapped in foam. She watched as a maintenance worker in overalls slipped a badge under his shirt and disappeared through a door marked Bravado. She followed at a distance and noted that the door required a keycard. She noted the maintenance man's shoes, expensive leather soles, not standard issue. She tucked that detail away. That evening she laid out her disguise on the bed. Black trousers, crisp white shirt, hijab, staff badge. She tucked the acid spray bottle into her shoe, the flash drive into her pocket. She sent a message to Caldwell's anonymous account. In position. Do not interfere. He read it on his phone in his hotel room, smiled sadly, and typed back, wouldn't dare. Lovelace shook her head. You're like a moth to a flame, she said. Caldwell pocketed the phone. We're all drawn to something, he answered. She's drawn to danger. I'm drawn to watching her outrun it. On the street below, tourists laughed and clinked glasses. In a villa on the Appian Way, Rossi loaded a silenced pistol. In a modest apartment in Trastevere, Nyasha closed her eyes for a moment of rest. Morning would bring art, champagne, and, if she was right, attempted kidnapping. She would be there, unseen until she needed to be. Early evening draped Rome in gold. Carabinieri closed via Barberini, and black sedans lined up like a parade of beetles. Nyasha adjusted her hijab and clipped her staff badge to her crisp white shirt. In a staff corridor, she felt the weight of the acid spray bottle hidden in her shoe and the flash drive taped to her back. She walked past a mirror and didn't recognize herself. That was the point. The staff entrance buzzed open at 6 sharp. A guard scanned badges, gave perfunctory nods. Kitchen smells, garlic, frying onions, mingled with the scent of polish. In the locker room, servers tied aprons, fussed with hair. A young woman from Naples applied lipstick and joked about celebrities. Nyasha smiled politely and slipped her gloves on. She walked to the kitchen's computer station, plugged in her drive, and triggered the CCTV loop program. On a screen, the ballroom replayed a seamless feed. She set the loop for 8 o'clock. 90 seconds. She removed the drive, replaced the keyboard, and joined the line of servers carrying trays to the salon. Meanwhile, Caldwell sat in a rented Alfa Romeo outside the Palazzo Barberini. Lovelace monitored scanner frequencies. Carabinieri units at all quadrants, she reported. Colonel Bianchi just moved a plainclothes guard to the emergency exit. Caldwell tried to catch a glimpse of Nyasha through the open door, but saw only flashes of white shirts and black slacks. He told himself he was only there to ensure the Italians were alert. He told himself he wasn't waiting to see a hint of her. Inside, the art fair glowed. LED projections of swirling paint moved across the ceiling. Sculptures stood on pedestals like frozen dancers. A jazz trio played standards. Guests clinked flutes and posed for selfies in front of a Caravaggio. Vincenzo Rossi entered on the arm of a blonde socialite, his tailored tuxedo impeccably cut. Malcolm Price followed, smiling for cameras. The Italian defense minister, in a dark suit and small flag pin, shook hands. Colonel Bianchi stood nearby, eyes scanning, earpiece in one ear. A waiter offered him a tray. He declined. Nyasha moved through the room with practiced grace. She poured champagne, exchanged pleasantries, and counted. She noted positions of guards and number of guests. She saw a man in a maintenance uniform slip behind a tapestry. His shoes were all wrong, leather soles instead of rubber. She followed him with her eyes. Another man, in a waiter's jacket, lingered near the stage. His posture was military, his eyes scanning, not serving. She recognized the type. The woman from the villa. Hair pulled into a bun, stood by the emergency exit, badge clipped to her lapel. Nyasha's plan solidified. Jam the card reader with acid, neutralize the nearest threat, create a distraction. She looked at her watch. 7:50 p.m. On the street, Caldwell got out of the car and walked to the corner. Lovelace hissed, "What are you doing?" He ignored her. He wanted to feel the air, to sense the moment. He walked past tourists with cameras, past two carabinieri smoking. He glanced up at the windows of the palazzo. He wondered if Nyasha could feel him watching. He doubted it. She was too focused. In a room beneath the palace, Rossi's hired team waited. The man with the earpiece murmured into his mic, "On my mark," he said. Upstairs. The woman by the exit took a small spray bottle from her pocket and passed it over her badge, testing the reader. It beeped green. She smiled. At the sound booth. The man in the stiff jacket slid his hand toward a switch. He intended to kill the lights when they made their grab. No one noticed the tall waiter with expensive shoes slip a pistol into his palm. Almost no one. Nyasha's pulse quickened. Her 90-second loop would soon engage. She stepped toward the man with the glossy shoes, tray balanced on her palm. She feigned a stumble to gauge his reflexes. He didn't look down. He looked at her face. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed, not of identity, but of purpose. She smiled slightly, as if flirting. He stiffened. She passed by, heart racing. She brushed the card reader with her hip, feeling its smooth plastic. She knew she could jam it with a spray and buy time. She knew Caldwell was somewhere outside, trusting her. She knew Rossi and Price were 15 feet away, unaware they were targets. The seconds ticked. Colonel Bianchi sensed something off. He moved closer to the emergency exit, whispering into his radio. Caldwell, outside, checked his watch and felt a tug of dread. Rossi tapped his glass for attention, preparing to introduce the minister. Price whispered to a bodyguard. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Nyasha counted down. 5, 4, 3. She turned her wrist, tilting the tray, and let champagne start to spill. Champagne arced out of her tray and splashed across the expensive shoes. The man hissed and drew his foot back. Nyasha murmured an apology in Italian, eyes wide, shoulders rounded in submission. The cameras in the room, running her pre-recorded loop, showed nothing unusual. In reality, her left hand slid under the edge of the tray, fingers closing on the stun pin taped there. She pivoted, inserted the pin between his ribs, and pressed the button. His breath caught. The electric pulse rocked his nervous system. His eyes rolled back. His pistol slipped from his grip. She caught it under the tray, hidden by the cloth, and smiled innocently at a passing donor. "Scusi," she said again, guiding the assassin toward a curtain. Behind the heavy drape, she braced him against the marble, the gun in her hand pressed under his chin. "How many?" she whispered in English. His eyes fluttered. 3, he gasped. "Too late." "Who hired you?" she pressed. "Amalfi," he managed before his pupils dilated and he slumped. She glanced around. She couldn't drag him out without drawing attention. She used his belt to lash his hands to a curtain rod and tucked him behind a pedestal. 90 seconds could accommodate one neutralization, but not a removal. She slid the pistol into the waistband at the back of her trousers, under her shirt, and stepped back into the flow. The acid bottle in her shoe dug into her foot. She kicked her heel against the card reader on the emergency exit and, when no one looked, bent to adjust her shoe. She sprayed the device with a short squirt. The liquid bubbled and hissed, eating into the circuitry. The indicator light flickered and died. She straightened, smoothing her trousers. The door jammed. The woman with the bun frowned and tapped her badge. Nothing. She looked around, irritation flashing across her face. Nyasha moved on, noting the guard's confusion. One exit compromised. At the sound booth, the second man, waiter's jacket, earpiece, slid his hand toward a bank of switches. Nyasha approached from behind. She pretended to trip on a cable and flailed, bumping into him and sending his hand to his chest. He swore and grabbed her arm to steady her, his grip strong. "Watch it," he snarled in English. She lowered her voice. "Walk away," she said. He blinked, confused, then recognition lit his eyes. "You?" He breathed. She twisted her wrist, grabbed his thumb, and bent it back. He grunted and dropped a small remote. It clattered under the console. She kicked it farther away. He tried to knee her. She turned her hip, deflecting the blow, and jabbed the stun pin into his thigh. He convulsed. She lowered him, careful to keep his body between her and onlookers. "Amalfi hired you," she whispered. He spat saliva. "Rossi," he said. "Telecom deal." She pressed harder until he slumped. She hid him behind the console, wedged by a speaker. From the stage, Rossi raised his glass, oblivious. "Friends," he boomed. "Art brings us together." Bianchi frowned. The defense minister smiled. Price checked his phone. The third assassin, still unseen, adjusted something under his jacket. Nyasha searched. On a balcony above the crowd, a maintenance worker stepped out of a side door carrying a case. He set it on the railing and snapped it open. She glimpsed a suppressed rifle. Her stomach clenched. The balcony was 30 feet up, accessible by a narrow staircase at the far end. She couldn't reach it in time. She scanned for an alternative. The ceiling was covered in fabric draping. Above the stage hung a heavy light rig on a pulley. She moved to a floral centerpiece on a nearby table, an arrangement of roses and lilies as tall as her torso. The tablecloth hung heavy. She looped a napkin around the arrangement's base and then around the pulley rope that controlled the light rig. In one motion, she yanked the cloth and the rope. The centerpiece toppled onto the floor with a crash, shattering glass. The rope released, and the light rig dropped 6 inches. Guests screamed. The rifleman on the balcony flinched. His shot deflected into the plaster above the minister's head. Plaster rained down. Bianchi dove forward, shielding the minister and yelling into his radio. Rossi looked up, face draining of color. Price instinctively ducked. Nyasha dropped the napkin, grabbed a tray, and ran toward the door to the staircase. The loop timer flashed 0. Cameras returned to life. She was visible now. She would have to be fast. Outside, Caldwell heard the crash and the distant screams. He stiffened, hands gripping the steering wheel. Lovelace cursed under her breath. "She's in it," she said. Caldwell fought the urge to run inside. His phone buzzed. A text from Nyasha read, "Door jammed. 1 down. 2 to go." He swallowed hard. Colonel Bianchi's voice crackled on the police band. "Shots fired at Palazzo Barberini. All units respond." Sirens wailed. Tourists scattered. Nyasha reached the bottom of the staircase as the rifleman worked the bolt. She took the steps 2 at a time. Tray raised as a shield. Her heart thudded. She had no time to think of the exit or what came next. She would stop him or die trying. Nyasha sprinted up the narrow staircase, her lungs burning in the thin, recycled air. The tray clanged as bullets pinged off metal steps. The rifleman at the top struggled to chamber another round while keeping his balance on the small balcony ledge. He glanced over his shoulder, surprised to see a server bearing down on him. He raised the rifle. She brought the silver tray up, feeling the impact as the suppressed shot hit. The tray rang. She slammed her shoulder into him, driving him back. His heel caught on the door jamb. He stumbled. They grappled, weightless for a moment in the tangle of rope and velvet. Her knee connected with his sternum. He gasped. She twisted the rifle from his grip and flung it over the balcony. It clattered onto a marble bust below, shattering the sculpture's nose. Guests screamed anew. He pulled a knife, blade flashing. She caught his wrist, wrenched, and forced the knife down. It sliced his own thigh. He cried out. She struck his temple with the tray. He went limp. She bound his hands with a zip tie from her pocket and dragged him through the service door onto the catwalk behind the drapery. 3 down. She breathed into her mic, though she wore no mic. She dragged him behind a stack of lighting gels. Sirens wailed outside. On the floor, Colonel Bianchi directed Carabinieri. Officers rushed through the ballroom, weapons drawn. Price and Rossi clung to the wall. Price's face was gray. Rossi's was beet red. "You said it would be simple," he hissed at Price. Price's jaw clenched. "It was until your men failed," he shot back. Bianchi grabbed the man Nyasha had stunned behind the console. "Police!" he shouted. The man's eyes darted. He bolted for the door. 2 officers tackled him. Handcuffs clicked. Nyasha, unseen above, watched and allowed herself one heartbeat of satisfaction. Caldwell couldn't stay outside any longer. He ran toward the entrance with Lovelace close behind. Guards tried to bar his way. "I'm a sponsor," he snapped, flashing his ID. Inside, chaos reigned. Art lovers crouched under tables. Champagne dripped onto marble. Someone wept. He scanned for Nyasha. A flash of orange movement caught his eye near the balcony staircase. He saw her for a split second, hair tucked into a scarf, eyes blazing. Their gazes met. He wanted to shout, to thank her, to warn her. She shook her head once, a silent command, and disappeared back into the service hall. Bianchi's radio crackled. Suspects neutralized. Minister secure. He exhaled. He saw Caldwell and recognized him from news photos. "Mr. Caldwell," he said in English, "your people always bring excitement." Caldwell forced a smile. "I prefer innovation." He pointed at Rossi. That man is Vincenzo Rossi. He's behind multiple sabotage attempts. Rossi smiled coolly. I am a businessman and philanthropist, he replied in Italian. I donate millions to art. Bianchi cuffed him anyway. You can donate to the state attorney, he said. Price slipped away in the confusion, blending with diplomats. He buttoned his jacket over his earpiece and walked out the side door, phone already dialing. Upstairs, Nyasha moved through back corridors. Her heart still raced. Her hands shook, adrenaline flooding her veins. She ducked into a storage room, pulled off her hijab and staff badge, and stuffed them into a vent. She wiped sweat from her forehead. She opened a fire door that led to a staircase and descended, emerging into an alley behind the palazzo. Carabinieri ran past toward the front. She walked the other way, head down. On her phone, a message popped up, payment transferred. Leave the city. She deleted it. Caldwell looked around the ballroom, took in the chaos, the toppled arrangements, the terrified guests, and then returned his gaze to the doorway where he had seen her. She was gone. He closed his eyes for a second and silently mouthed, "Thank you." Lovelace touched his arm. "We should go," she said. He nodded. As they left, he passed Price in the hallway. They locked eyes. "Marcus," Price said, forcing a grin. "What a night." "Indeed," Caldwell replied coldly. "I hear your friend Rossi is going to need a good lawyer." Price shrugged. "In Italy, lawyers are plentiful." They shook hands briefly. Behind the grip, tension coiled. Neither trusted the other. The next morning, Italian newspapers declared minister saved in foiled kidnapping plot. Bianchi was hailed as a hero. Rossi's lawyers claimed mistaken identity. American papers lauded the seamless cooperation between nations. The name of the anonymous server who disrupted the attempt did not appear. In a cramped apartment in Trastevere, Nyasha packed her bag. She stuffed cash into her boot, wrapped her multi-tool in a scarf, and scribbled a note to the cigarette woman, "Grazie." She left it under the cafe table. She slipped through dawn streets to the station, boarded a train to Naples, and from there took a ferry to Tunis. Caldwell's plane lifted off from Fiumicino, heading west. Price flew east. In a prison cell, Rossi stewed. On a rooftop in Rome, Lovelace lit a cigarette and watched the sunrise. In the end, only those in the shadows knew the whole story, and they weren't talking. Vincenzo Rossi sat in a Roman interrogation room, his silk tie removed, his cufflinks in an evidence bag. He leaned back, fingers steepled, as prosecutors laid out the charges: conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, weapons violations. "I am a patron of the arts," Rossi said in Italian. "I was set up by competitors who fear my success." His lawyer nodded vigorously. The state's case was circumstantial. Covert footage of his hired men, payment trails through shell companies, a burned panel on Aurora traced to his investment fund. Rossi's phone records vanished the week before the gala. His lawyers filed motions. The court released him to house arrest pending trial. A van drove him to his villa outside Florence. He poured wine and made calls. Price returned to London and issued a statement expressing shock at the plot, praising Italian security and offering to fund museum security upgrades. Reporters asked if he knew Rossi. "Of course," he said. "We attend the same events. That doesn't make me a criminal." Stocks in Price's company dipped, then recovered. Internally, he told his team to sever all visible ties to Amalfi. The unknown man in the villa called him. "We missed our chance," Price said. "Rossi is compromised. We must find another way to leverage the minister." The voice replied, "There are other ministers. And other billionaires." Price nodded. "We adapt." Caldwell returned to Houston and gathered his executives. Slides projected financial forecasts, risk assessments, and public sentiment graphs. "Aurora has survived its first crisis," his CFO said. "Bookings are down 20% but expected to rebound." A board member raised the issue of security budgets. Caldwell nodded. "We can't operate in a bubble anymore. There are players who sabotage hardware and kidnap ministers. We will create a dedicated risk team." He appointed Lovelace to head it. Behind the scenes, he wired another payment to Nyasha's offshore account with a note, "Stay safe." She didn't reply. He didn't expect her to. On his home office wall, the photo of them in uniform remained. He touched it with his fingertip and smiled. He owed her no more debts, but he would keep repaying. Nyasha spent a week in Tunisia, wandering the Medina in Tunis. breathing the scent of spices and diesel. She watched fishermen mend nets and drank mint tea with a woman who had given her a fake passport a decade ago. "You never stop," the woman laughed. "No," Nyasha said. "I stopped between jobs." She thought of the coin Reeves gave her, heavy in her pocket. She thought of Rome's marble floors and plastic champagne glasses. She thought of Rossi's cold eyes and Price's bland smile. She wondered if she was making a difference or just plugging holes in a sinking ship. Then her phone chimed. An encrypted message. Amalfi moving assets to South China Sea. New threat to renewable energy platform. Intel attached. She shook her head, smiled without humor, and replied, "Send more data." She slipped the phone into her pocket, finished her tea, and walked toward the harbor. Boats bobbed in the turquoise water. The horizon blurred into sky. She had always loved horizons. In Austin, Ethan Caldwell showed his father his science project, a model rocket. "Can I go to space someday?" he asked. Caldwell looked into his son's eyes and thought of flaming thrusters, spinning stars. A woman tethered to a capsule. "Maybe," he said, "but promise me you'll listen to the people who know what they're doing." Ethan grinned. "Like the lady who saved us?" Caldwell nodded. "Exactly." In a dim bar in Hong Kong, the man who had failed in Rome listened to an offer from a new financier. "We hear you have experience acquiring people," the financier said. The man rubbed his jaw where a bruise remained from Nyasha's tray. "What's the target?" The financier slid over a photograph of an offshore wind platform and a dossier marked CEO. "Western Renewable Energy Company, worth billions," he said. "Their shares will plummet if their CEO disappears. We're buying options." The man nodded slowly. "Payment? 50 million. The financier said. The man pocketed the photo. "Where?" "South China Sea." He stood. He would not fail again. Across the world, Lovelace sat in her Houston office. Satellite maps spread before her. She drew lines from Rome to Dubai to the Gulf of Mexico to the South China Sea. "They're attacking energy and tech," she murmured. She wrote Amalfi on a sticky note. Caldwell popped his head in. "Trouble?" he asked. She smiled. "Always," she said. They laughed, the sound easing the weight that hung in the room. In Trastevere, a cigarette smoke curled up into the night. The newspaper woman folded chairs outside her cafe and found an envelope marked Grazie. She opened it to find a single photograph. A blurred woman in a hijab, a wine glass raised, eyes laughing. A note scribbled on the back read, "Until next time." The woman smiled, tucked the photo into her apron, and lit another cigarette. Life went on. So did the game. The conference room at Caldwell Quantum thrummed with low voices and the hum of a refrigerated projector. Maps of the South China Sea, dotted with oil rigs and wind farms, covered the screen. Lovelace pointed to a cluster of turbines off the coast of Vietnam. "Blue Horizon Platform," she said. 500 megawatts. Run by Oceanus Renewables, headquartered in Seattle. CEO is Patrick Monroe, age 52, widower, 2 kids at Stanford. She tapped a folder. "We intercepted chatter linking Amalfi to a plot to kidnap Monroe while he tours the platform next week. Payment would come from futures traders shorting Oceanus stock." Caldwell leaned back. Fingers steepled. Kidnapping Monroe could destabilize renewable energy markets and hand an advantage to fossil giants. It could also derail our own battery project with Oceanus. A board member adjusted his tie. "We aren't law enforcement," he murmured. Caldwell shot him a look. "The FBI can't operate in Vietnamese waters. Oceanus hired private security with no kidnapping experience. We have a contact who can be on site unseen." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. The board didn't vote. Caldwell nodded to Lovelace. She sent an encrypted email. Nyasha sat in a cafe in Tunis when her phone vibrated. She opened the message, "Platform in South China Sea. CEO at risk. Team Amalfi involved. Time frame, 7 days. Cover role, supply technician. Use alias. Mailing contact pickup in Singapore." She finished her strong coffee, paid cash, and crossed the narrow street to a travel agency. 24 hours later, she walked through Changi Airport with a fake Chinese passport and a bag of oil-stained work clothes. In Singapore, she met a wiry Malaysian named Arif on a dock. "You may?" he asked. She nodded. He handed her a laminated badge that read Oceanus Logistics and gestured to a small supply vessel loaded with crates. "We leave in an hour. Don't get seasick." Patrick Monroe was nervous about the trip. He stood on the tarmac at Da Nang Airport, watching engineers load his company helicopter. "You sure about this?" his assistant asked. "The board wants photos of me with turbines," he said, forcing a smile. "Investors like visuals." His bodyguard, a former Green Beret, scanned the runway. "We've coordinated with Vietnamese Coast Guard," he said. "No threats." Monroe nodded but checked his phone again. His daughter had texted, "Be safe, Dad. I hear you're meeting cool windmills." He smiled and pocketed the phone. He didn't know someone had offered $50 million to snatch him from his own deck. In Hong Kong, the failed kidnapper from Rome sat with Rossi's financier at a private gym. The platform sits 60 miles off coast, no military presence. The financier said, showing satellite images. "You go in as maintenance crew on a supply boat, plant explosives to disable communications, grab Monroe, and exit on a fast boat toward Hainan, Chinese waters. Our friends will meet you." The kidnapper rubbed his bruised jaw. "What about the ghost?" he asked. "She won't be there," the financier said. "Our intel says she's in North Africa." The kidnapper grunted. Intel lied before. He thought of a woman in a hijab and a tray, and his hand tightened on the coffee cup until the paper crinkled. As the supply vessel cut through choppy seas, Nyasha tucked a strand of hair under a cheap cap and studied a dossier Arif handed her. It contained schematics of Blue Horizon, living quarters, turbine towers, helipad. She memorized emergency codes. Arif leaned over. "You work offshore before?" he asked. "A long time ago," she answered. He laughed. "Easy money. Boring." She smiled thinly. Boring sounded nice. She watched the horizon. Wind turbines appeared like white giants rising from the waves. Gulls circled. The sun burned. A helicopter shadow passed overhead, headed for the same destination. She slid her hand into her pocket and felt the cool weight of a familiar coin. She squeezed it once for luck. The game was on again. Blue Horizon rose from the waves like a small city. Wind turbines spun in rhythmic silence, their blades slicing air above the spray. Nyasha stepped off the supply boat onto a steel deck slick with salt and oil. Hard-hatted workers in coveralls hauled crates. Arif introduced her to the deck boss as May, temp technician. The boss grunted and pointed her toward the battery room. She followed pipes and cables past humming inverters and felt the platform sway. Overhead, the company helicopter touched down, rotors whipping sea mist. Patrick Monroe climbed out, hard hat askew, hand shielding his eyes. Two men in white coveralls approached him with welcoming smiles and shook his hand. One's grip was too tight. His eyes darted past Monroe toward the maintenance door. Nyasha noted the detail. Below, she found an unplugged comms box hanging open. A small explosive charge sat nestled among wires. Her chest tightened. She snapped a photo with her phone and sent it via the hidden app Caldwell's team had supplied. Lovelace responded instantly, disable and hide. For suspects in white coveralls. Nyasha pulled the multi-tool from her boot and cut the detonation circuit. She tucked the device into her pocket. Someone's plan required silence. When she returned topside, the two white coveralled men were guiding Monroe toward the maintenance door, laughing about weather sensors. His bodyguard trailed, distracted by a worker asking for a photo. Nyasha intercepted the group. "Sorry, sir," she said in accented English. "Safety check." "That area closed." The shorter man scowled. "We have clearance," he said, flashing a badge. She smiled. "Not for VIP." She stood her ground. The taller man's hand drifted toward his belt. Nyasha's elbow shot out, striking his solar plexus. He doubled over. She grabbed the taller one's wrist, twisted, and heard a ceramic blade drop. Monroe's eyes widened. The bodyguard recovered and drew his pistol, covering the men. "Down," he barked. Workers scattered. The shorter man lunged. Nyasha ducked, swept his legs, and he crashed onto the deck. She dropped her knee on his back and zip-tied his hands. A siren wailed. The deck boss shouted into his radio. Arif ran toward them. The third accomplice, the one with the tight handshake, sprinted toward the edge and leaped onto a waiting skiff. The craft sped away toward open water. She watched it go. She couldn't catch it without a boat. She turned back. Monroe breathed hard. "Who are you?" he asked. "Maintenance," she said deadpan. He laughed, half hysteria, half relief. She handed the knife to the bodyguard. "Check everyone's shoes," she added. "Bad guys always buy good shoes." He nodded. Hours later, as Vietnamese Coast Guards escorted the platform, Caldwell read Lovelace's report. He smiled. "One more rig saved," he said. On Blue Horizon, Nyasha sat on a crate, rubbing salt from her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Payment transferred. Rest. She pocketed it. She looked out at the turbines turning against the sunset. Another job done. Another horizon ahead.